A single candle flickers in a room built directly above a mountain of gold. This is the tragic, undeniable paradox of the Sahel. For over half a century, the boundless wealth of a continent shaped the grand, glittering boulevards of foreign capitals, while 87% of its own children sat in the pitch dark. The red earth bled, but the prophets fled. For too long, the silence of the desert was bought, sold, and paid for by those who drew arbitrary lines on a map from the absolute comfort of distant palaces. But maps do not bleed. People do. The mothers who bury their children in the dust do. And today, that long, agonizing silence has finally been broken. The ancient drum of the continent is beating an entirely new rhythm across the vast rolling sands of resistance. If this resonates with your sense of justice, do not leave. Like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe, not for us, but to keep the flame of dignity burning. We have now entered the 24th day of an unrelenting historic counteroffensive. The strategic chessboard of the Sahel is shifting violently beneath our feet, defying every narrative broadcasted by mainstream Western media. For weeks, the joint collaboration of the Malian armed forces and their allied African corps has been executing a sophisticated, wide assortment of aerial and ground maneuvers designed to reclaim what was systematically stolen from them. This is no minor border skirmish. This is a profound pivot in modern history, an awakening that cannot be subdued by negative propaganda or foreign subversion. The military advance has already swept through critical buffer zones, systematically tightening an iron vice around the ultimate stronghold of the insurgency. First came the heavy, decisive clearing operations in the Tintar region, flushing out the hidden cells that had terrorized local villages for years. Then the steel armor rolled through the volatile, windswept fields of the Bayer sector, destroying the parallel logistics lifelines of the enemy. Finally, the heavy forces consolidated their immense strength in Gao. These are not merely names on a map. They are the defensive shields, the historic gatekeepers of the north. And just beyond them lies the ticking heart of the entire desert, Kidal. The mainstream media repeatedly warns of an unstable junta using words designed to instill fear and doubt in the minds of the global public. But the local streets do not speak the language of foreign newsrooms. The streets call this deliverance. They built chains. We break them. This is not charity. This is not aid. This is absolute sovereignty. On the long, dusty roads leading directly up to the northern strongholds, the atmosphere is heavy with a collective pride that has been buried for 3 generations. Local reconnaissance assets have mapped out every square centimeter of the shifting desert terrain, ensuring that no shadow remains unmonitored. Already, the air units have begun pummeling the enemy positions with absolute precision, hunting down the highly advanced equipment and vehicles provided by hidden international sponsors. A logistics truck transporting enemy weapons was completely vaporized by an aerial strike northeast of Bayer, leaving nothing but scattered metal in the sand. The message from the general staff is loud, clear, and unyielding. The days of compromise are over. Yet as the ground columns halt just outside the city limits, an eerie, suffocating silence descends upon the valley. The radio frequencies have gone completely dead. Kidal is waiting, suspended between the ghosts of its colonial past and the fierce light of a new dawn. The suffocating quiet outside the city gates did not signify hesitation. It was the calculated breath taken before the storm. When the silence finally broke, it did so with a deafening precision that shattered decades of foreign complacency. This phase of the Mali counteroffensive is not a blind display of raw power, but a surgical dismantling of a deeply entrenched terror network. Local intelligence combined with elite aerial reconnaissance brought immediate, undeniable results. 9 kilometers west of the locality of Jafar, a major terrorist hideout long considered impenetrable by foreign analysts was completely reduced to ash. Simultaneously, 92 kilometers northeast of the city of Bayer, a specialized Land Rover prototype vehicle, a prized asset used by the insurgent command, was intercepted and entirely obliterated. These are not random coordinates. They are the severed arteries of an engineered destabilization. For years, these armed groups operated with absolute impunity, moving like ghosts across the red earth on fleets of modern motorcycles, melting away into the dunes whenever external forces pretended to pursue them. But the rules of the desert have changed. Following the devastating impacts near Bayer and the surrounding sectors, the remaining insurgent fighters scattered in frantic directions, their logistics lifelines completely severed. Further south, 60 kilometers southwest of Gao, another major gathering was caught in the open. neutralizing dozens of combatants and rendering their high-tech equipment useless. This is the heavy, meticulous work of reclamation. Every strike is a scar healed on the skin of the homeland. Every intercepted shipment is a broken link in the chain of modern bondage. The old order, which thrived on a weak central government and neglected peripheral regions, is dissolving in the heat of the midday sun. Yet as these undeniable victories unfold on the ground, a parallel war is being waged in the pristine studios of European broadcasters. Watch the state-run channels in Paris and London, read the columns of RFY and France 24, and you will sense an underlying panic masked as journalistic concern. They look at the popular revival in Bamako not with objectivity but with a bitter desire for revenge against the nations that dared to evict them from what they still arrogantly consider their own private backyard. They never speak of the legitimate aspirations of millions. They never acknowledge the deep-seated popular support backing these movements. Instead, they weaponize vocabulary repeating the word junta like a protective mantra to delegitimize a government that is more deeply connected to its people than any Western-installed puppet of the past 50 years. They call it a junta. The streets call it deliverance. They print lies. The Red Earth writes the truth. This systematic distortion exists because the old colonial masters cannot stomach the reality of an organized sovereign African response. They are terrified of what a definitive Kidal tactical victory would mean for the entire balance of power in the region. For generations, the strategy was to keep the central state weak so that the peripheral wealth could be drained without taxation, without negotiation, and without consequence. But today, the civilian population stands side by side with the armed forces, their smiles reflecting a newfound collective pride that no psychological warfare can erase. They see their own sons and daughters executing complex infantry maneuvers never before seen in this theater. The tightening noose around the insurgency proves that the old networks are crumbling, but as the final assault begins, an unsettling paradox remains. How do men hiding in barren desert caves afford advanced drones, state-of-the-art communication arrays, and heavy armor? Where does the money truly come from? To understand how these armed networks survive in the absolute emptiness of the desert, one must look deep beneath the topsoil. It is not a matter of spontaneous ideology. It is a cold, calculated transaction. For decades, a hidden parallel lifeline has quietly drained the vital lifeblood of the land. We are talking about the vast, unmapped, illegal gold mining networks, operational structures like the heavily contested Init mine, where raw wealth was systematically clawed out of the African earth without taxation, without domestic negotiation, and without a single shred of accountability. Under previous regimes, these networks served as an open tap for foreign interests, directly transforming local mineral wealth into deadly armaments that ultimately targeted the very communities that harvested them. The conflict was never just about a warped ideology. It was a business model designed to keep a continent in a perpetual state of artificial fracture. Before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member of the Sahel Doctrine. This is not for mere perks or transactions. Supporting this space means directly sustaining the narratives that mainstream corporate media desperately tries to silence. Every member becomes an active co-creator of this historical documentation, standing firmly with the unyielding principle that African wealth belongs exclusively to African hands. Join us and help keep this torch of truth burning bright. The response from this collective alliance has shaken this illicit infrastructure to its very foundation. The strategic focus of the military command has shifted from mere defensive containment to the total uncompromising suffocation of the enemy's financial oxygen. In a series of highly coordinated operations, joint forces launched a sequence of devastating strikes directly onto these gold mining lifelines. The impact at the Init facility was so immense that the economic damage became completely unsustainable for the insurgent leadership. They did not just retreat, they abandoned their heavy extraction equipment and fled deeper into the borderless wilderness. For the first time in over half a century, the illegal channels are being clogged and the unmonitored flow of wealth is being forcefully redirected back to its rightful owners. This is precisely where the grand strategy transforms from a localized military response into what is now recognized as the definitive Ibrahim Traore doctrine. Across the border in Burkina Faso, the young captain recognized that true liberation cannot be achieved by matching bullets alone. It requires the absolute reclamation of the economic front line. While the ground units in Mali dismantle the physical camps, the leadership in Ouagadougou has systematically torn up the unequal neo-colonial mining contracts that allowed external corporate entities to siphon off the nation's future for a pittance. This is the profound intersection of the Africa sovereignty movement. It is a unified cross-border synchronization where military precision meets legislative courage. The calloused hands that till the soil are now the very hands holding the blueprint of a self-determined future. The young leader's stance has sent shockwaves through foreign boardroom meetings, proving that the modern Sahel refuses to be an open treasure chest for external powers. By hitting both the physical fighters and their financial masters simultaneously, the alliance has forced the insurgency into a corner of absolute desperation. The old parallel network is fractured, leaving the remaining extremist cells exposed and starving for supplies. But a wounded beast is often the most dangerous. Realizing that their economic lifeblood is drying up, the scattered remnants of the armed groups are consolidating what remains of their heavy ordnance for a massive, reckless gamble. Intelligence feeds indicate unusual panicked movements concentrated directly towards the strategic Koulikoro sector. The trap is closing, but the enemy is preparing to unleash a wave of unprecedented violence to break the siege. The asymmetric nature of this silent war demands far more than conventional force. It requires an unyielding, reconstructed spirit. In the critical Koulikoro region, heavy reconnaissance units recently identified a massive, heavily fortified enemy stronghold hidden deep within the rugged terrain. The response from the unified command was instantaneous and absolute. A precision-guided aerial strike tore through the camp, completely devastating their command structure and neutralizing their remaining heavy assets. For the scattered fighters who managed to escape into the arid brush with severe shrapnel wounds, the desert offered no sanctuary. When the systemic circulation of a network is violently ruptured, when its vital lines of oxygen, fuel, and ammunition are permanently severed, the total collapse of the entire organism becomes mathematically inevitable. This is the unvarnished reality of the new defensive strategy, a meticulous, uncompromising purification of ancestral lands. The military doctrine has fundamentally shifted forever. The historical era of passive containment and hollow foreign-mandated containment agreements has been permanently replaced by a resolute march toward total territorial integrity. Pause for a moment and share with us where you are watching this video. Is it from Africa, from Europe, from the Americas, or from a small village whose name deserves to be spoken aloud? Tell us in the comments below. Because every square centimeter of this world matters. The Sahel Doctrine wants to thank you personally for your incredible dedication to historical truth and to send a profound wish across the vast distance. May freedom, strength, and dignity walk beside you and your family wherever you stand on this earth. Let our comments section become not just a collection of words, but an unbreakable bridge of international solidarity. As the dust begins to settle over the reclaimed valleys of Koulikoro, the profound human element of this struggle comes into sharp focus. This is not a conflict born of sudden, spontaneous chaos. It is the roaring resurrection of a generational fire. When the domestic infantry forces enter these liberated towns, they are met not with apprehension, but with an immense outpouring of profound relief and collective pride. Elderly grandmothers who have survived decades of engineered instability and artificial poverty embrace young soldiers with tears streaming down their weathered faces. These communities remember the early dawn of independence in the 1960s, when visionary fathers of the nation attempted to dissolve artificial colonial borders and build a unified, self-reliant federation. They remember how those magnificent dreams were systematically undermined, crushed by external financial manipulation, engineered military coups, and a succession of hand-picked dictators who answered to foreign masters rather than their own people. For over half a century, the global community watched in absolute silence as this vast region was treated as nothing more than an open-air resource mine. But the collective memory of a people cannot be erased by diplomatic pressure or media blackout. The current generation has inherited those unresolved scars, transforming ancestral pain into an unyielding shield of resistance. Yet as the songs of liberation echo across the plains, the true architects of global power are beginning to realize that their grip is slipping on a prize far more lucrative than gold. Deep beneath the northern sands where the borders of Mali and Niger meet lies the ultimate catalyst of the old imperial engine, and the fuse is already burning down to the powder. Look at the vast, desolate stretches of Arlit deep within the desert expanse of neighboring Niger. Here lies the raw fuel of the old imperial engine, uranium. For generations, this single mineral has powered the glittering lights, the advanced industries, and the domestic electricity grids of Western Europe, ensuring that every third light bulb in a foreign capital shines bright. Yet directly beneath this massive source of global energy, 87% of the local population was left to survive by the dim light of a flickering candle. This is the critical mass of geopolitical exploitation, an equilibrium designed to prevent the global South from ever achieving true technical and economic self-reliance. The architects of this system knew that if the resources of the desert were ever united with a genuine popular will, the entire matrix of modern dependency would shatter. The current siege is not an isolated border dispute. It is a direct, uncompromising confrontation with this deep structural injustice. We look back at the long list of installed puppet regimes and broken promises with a profound sense of regret for the decades systematically stolen from a vibrant continent. But that lingering regret has now transformed into an unyielding righteous fire. The peoples of the Sahel are no longer asking for an external license to own their tomorrow. The old paradigm which viewed this immense region as a passive, fragmented chessboard for global superpowers has been permanently dissolved by a sudden collective awakening. This is the true living pulse of the Africa sovereignty movement, not a mere rhetorical slogan, but a lived reality sweeping across the red soil, proving that the ancestral drum can never be permanently silenced by foreign pressure. Before we close, let us pause and reflect on the true weight of this historic shift. What you have witnessed today is not simply an episode of military strategy. It is a profound reminder that sovereignty, dignity, and collective hope are still very much alive, waiting to be claimed by those brave enough to stand. If this message has moved your heart and spoken directly to your sense of global justice, then subscribe to this channel, the Sahel Doctrine. We do not ask for mere numbers or digital metrics, but because we are building a sanctuary where the voices of independence are deeply honored and where stories of unyielding pride continue to be told across borders. By subscribing, you are choosing to walk beside us into the next unfolding chapter of a continent breaking its own chains and defining its own destiny. The final destination is no longer a distant, impossible mirage in the dunes. As the domestic ground forces secure the final perimeters and the air assets permanently silence the resistance of the foreign-funded insurgency, the historical significance of this moment becomes absolute. The unfolding Mali counteroffensive has proved to a skeptical world that a unified, determined people cannot be conquered by engineered chaos or media distortion. The long, painful night of exploitation is drawing to a definitive close, replaced by the fierce, brilliant light of a rising sun. When the history books are rewritten by the hands that actually fought the battle, the immense sacrifice of this generation will be immortalized, not as a transient conflict, but as the exact moment a continent reclaimed its soul. The dawn of a new era has arrived, and a definitive Kidal tactical victory stands as a monumental testament to this unstoppable regional revival. Let the world take note, and let the message echo from the deepest valleys to the highest peaks. A sovereign Africa has awakened, and this historic Kidal tactical victory is just the beginning.